In this lesson, we'll work on adding an environment to our aircraft scene. Okay, so at this point now we have our aircraft, and we've gone in, we've added some nice particle effects to this, we've got some really nice animation, but one of the things that is definitely missing from this is if we were to come in here and take a quick render, you notice that we really don't have any sort of a background here. It's just sort of a flat black color. So what we want to do is come in here and start to add a little bit more of an environment to this and really sort of make this whole scene feel a little bit more realistic. Okay, so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to come in and let's go up to our rendering menu and go to Environment. Okay, now here, right now the environment color is set to black. Now what we could do is plug in a map to use back here instead. So we're going to turn on Use Map, go to Environment Map, let's go and plug in a bitmap for this. Alright, and if you take a look inside the Scene Assets Images directory of this project, we have this city panorama. So we're going to plug this in, just double click, and this is an HDR image, so a high dynamic range image. This is an image that contains 32 bits of color information, so much more color and luminance information that can be stored compared to a typical 8-bit image. So this is going to be a great image to use for lighting and things like that. So this is plugged in now. If we come in and take a quick render. So if we take a look at this, you can see that now we actually can see the environment, but it really doesn't look natural. This is an environment that is actually built to be a spherical environment, so it's meant to be wrapped around a sphere to create our final look. So at this point, though, it's definitely not doing that. It's essentially just taking the full image and putting it here in the background. So let's change this up. What we could do to make this actually visible here in the renderer, or here in the viewport, is let's come up here, let's go to Viewport Background, and set this to Environment Background. It's being cut off just a little bit on your screen, but it's going to be this option right here. There we go, and now we can actually see the image loaded up as our background. Now, let's switch this to where we can actually use this as a spherical background. So to do this, I'm going to open up my material editor, just tapping the M key on my keyboard. Just remember M for material. Now let's take this environment map, let's click and drag this into my material editor. It's going to ask us if we want to make an instance of this, in other words, if we want to use the same one, or if we want to make a copy. In our case, we're going to use an instance because whatever changes we make in here, we want to affect this up here. Okay, so here's our map. If we take a look at that, let's just double click on that. Right now you can see that whenever we plug this in, it is going to be set to be an environment because 3ds Max makes that connection for us automatically. But this is our problem right here, this mapping. Right now it's set to screen. And if you take a look down in this area, I'll try to move some of these windows over to clear out some room. But with it set to screen, you can see that for one, it's all flattened out. It's not a spherical image. But also as the camera moves, you notice that this environment stays completely static. That's really not what we want. Again, that is because of this screen mapping. What we want to do instead is set that to a spherical environment. There we go. Give this just a moment to update. So it should update here, and it should also update here in the viewport as well. So now, as I move this around, now it's actually treating this like a real background. Very nice. Now what I will do is come in here and try to make some adjustments to this to try to get maybe just rotating this around a little bit. So let's double click on our map, and to change this we're going to adjust this offset. So we can take the offset U, and essentially that's just going to rotate this image around. And what I want to do is try to rotate it to the point where maybe we have a little bit more of this sunlight sort of here in the back. There we go. Just move that down and out of the way. And let's see what that looks like. So we have some sunlight here. We have the buildings that are surrounding us. Camera moves up and then follows this aircraft out of the scene. Very nice. Now what I might also do is try to tilt this environment down just a little bit so that way it doesn't show up where we have sort of these buildings in the background here, because what's probably going to happen is because we're zoomed in so tight, these are really going to start to blur out just because we don't have enough pixels that make up this map. Okay, so what we could do is maybe just try to focus the camera a little bit more up in this sky area where it's already going to be more or less flat colors. So what we could try to do is take this offset V and maybe just use a very small value for this, maybe 0.01. Actually, that's tilting it the other way, so let's try negative 0.01. There we go, and that should just tilt this down just a few pixels, just enough to where we shouldn't be seeing much of these buildings in the background. We could tilt it down maybe just a little bit more if we needed to. But that is basically the process and the workflow of taking some kind of a photographic environment and mapping it to the camera. So now this is going to really help ground this object in reality. Okay, very nice. So now that we have some sort of a photographic environment back here, what we want to try to do now is try to set up our lighting in a way that matches this environment as close as possible. So in our next lesson, we'll start the process of taking this photographic environment and actually using that to derive lighting information.